Webinar. My name is Colleen Nelson. I am the program supervisor for the Gatekeeper program. So today's webinar is presented by Shining Care. And Shining Care is a nonprofit agency that serves Shasta, Siskiyou, and Tehama counties. Our trusted professionals are committed to extending compassion, hope, and connection to needed resources for quality of life for elders, disabled adults, and their loved ones. This is our first webinar for us, so please bear with us as if we run into any technical difficulties today. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping rules for us. Just a few things. First of all, feel free to grab a beverage, a snack, whatever you might need, as you will see us, but we will not be able to see you. So today's webinar is being recorded and will be available after the event is complete. Right now, I already have them up on the website at shiningcare.org, all the handouts that we'll be using today. All participants are muted for this webinar. And for any questions that you might have today for our panelists or for our keynote speaker can be utilized through the Q&A tab that is on the bottom of your screen. So use that one specifically to ask questions that we will then share during the Q&A time. There is a tab for chat that is just for the attendees to be able to chat amongst themselves. We will have a 5-minute break right after Paul finishes speaking and before we transition into our panels. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our founder and director of Shining Care, Joanne McCarley. Joanne is a certified care manager with a degree in social work, and as well as over 28 years of experience working with seniors, disabled adults, and both medical and community setting. So we will welcome Joanne.
Thank you, Colleen. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited to bring this webinar to you today. Normally we would do a symposium, but because of the COVID-19, we can't do that, obviously. So this is our very first webinar. Please bear with us. But we're just so excited to bring this information with these amazing professionals to you today. After we're through, you will be equipped to help protect our seniors. And that's the whole reason we're here, is we want to help keep our seniors and dependent adults safe. So thank you for joining us. So before we get started, I would like to recognize our very valuable supporters and sponsors. And they're the ones who help make this possible. So thank you, PSA2, Area Agency on Aging, Cornerstone Community Bank, Marquis Shasta, and My Umbrella Marketing. So like I said, today you're going to become really informed and equipped to help protect our seniors. And what you're going to learn is one way, easy way. It's free. It's just what you do in the course of every day. You can be a gatekeeper. And we're going to be talking more about that. But we're up on the screen, you'll see what our website looks like. I encourage everyone that when this is over, please go explore our website. It's full of really helpful resources and information, and you can learn all about how you can be a gatekeeper. Okay. So do we have, hopefully Stephanie has joined our screen. I don't see her on the screen yet.
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Stephanie. Hello. Well, we're just so happy to have our very own district attorney, Stephanie Pridgett. And as you see, we've got her bio up on the screen. She's just an amazing asset to our community, and we're just so happy. Stephanie, thank you for coming to share today before we start with our keynote speaker.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me. Did you want me to go ahead and speak, or what?
Go ahead and speak now. Yeah.
Well, I think we're all still getting used to these formats of any type of communication. All right, is my audio working? Everyone can hear me? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I thank you guys for allowing me to have just a couple of minutes to say how important I think events like this are, and everything that we do in the month of June to bring awareness to elder abuse, whether it be physical abuse, financial abuse. It's so important to get that information out there, to work with all of our partners to make sure that we're able to protect some of the most vulnerable people in our community. To let you know what our office does in the area of elder abuse. I know we've got a couple specific speakers from my office later today, so I won't step on what they're going to say, but if we just look at 2019, in 2019, my crime victim assistance unit, they served 169 elder abuse victims. So that really lets you know that in our community, that's how many were referred into our office, got to that level of potential prosecution and referred into our office for potential prosecution. Or even if it doesn't go to prosecution, our advocates can help them get services, connect them to the right agencies that they may need. Since 2016, we've had a specific grant that serves the underserved population, which includes elder victims. So that's been a really good tool to make sure that we're able to reach out to that many potential victims in a year, because that funds a full-time advocate that's going to look at those elder abuse cases and give them the special attention that they need, because we all know that that's a hard to serve population a lot of time, because they don't want to report the abuse because their abuser is, quite frankly, a lot of times it's someone that they know. It's a loving, or what they see as a loving family member that they don't want to get in trouble, a grandchild, a child, or anyone else connected to them. So it's great to have an advocate who can work specifically with those individuals and help them through the process and get them the services that they need. Also in 2019, we did prosecute several cases. We filed 47 cases of elder abuse, and that includes both felony and misdemeanor cases. We had 31 felony cases that we filed and 16 misdemeanor cases. That would be on top of any cases from previous years that go into the next year. You'll be hearing from Deputy District Attorney Michael Che later today, who handles those cases and can kind of give you a breakdown, because he does any, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, the criminal prosecution piece to help protect our victims, elder abuse victims in our community. So he specializes in that and has those cases specially assigned to him so that he can get called out by a local agency if need be on a case that needs a prosecutor involved from the beginning. He can work on filing those cases all the way through up to sentencing, because those are really a special type of victim that we need to make sure we pay that extra attention to. So that is part of our family violence unit, to make sure those cases get the attention that they need. And then also we have a second prosecutor who helps in this area, and that would be our Senior Deputy District Attorney, Lucky Jesrani, who's going to speak later today, who does our consumer protection and fraud. And I think we all know that a lot of elders are, unfortunately, fall victim to fraud and are targeted for fraud, be it to try to get money from them, get their house from them, whatever it may be. And that's a population that sometimes, unfortunately, are going to be more willing to talk to people on the phone or fall victim to email scams. So I think it's important that we're able to get that information out and help those victims, not only from the criminal prosecution with Deputy DA Che, but also from the civil fraud protection unit side with our Senior Deputy DA Jesrani. And then finally, we have a Bureau of Investigations. They have investigators that can help follow up on those cases and make sure that they are ready and they are solid cases for prosecution. So we're very happy to partner with all of you. I'm going to be able to stay on here probably for another 20, 30 minutes to listen. I wish I could have been on for the entire thing, but I thank you so much for including me in this. And we're here as partners to do what we can to help stop elder abuse in our community. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was really great information. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
This is such, as we all know, such an important topic. So now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Paul Greenwood. And he spoke here last year, and he speaks all around the nation. And as you see, he has quite a bio. He's a nationally recognized speaker, and his area of expertise is in elder abuse. And he's been a lawyer for over 40 years and recently retired, hopefully enjoying retirement. And bless his heart, he's still working, advocating for seniors as a speaker now. But he worked in the San Diego District Attorney's Office, serving as Deputy District Attorney. And he was the head of Elder Abuse Prosecution since 1996, and has been involved in the prosecution of over 700 elder abuse cases. And Mr. Greenwood is currently the co-chair of California's DA Elder Abuse Committee, and he's been featured. We're just so honored because, you know, Paul, you're quite famous, and you're such a delight to hear, and such a power hitter for our seniors. So being featured on Eye in America and Nightly News, and now here in our Shasta far northern region. We know that Paul has done extensive criminal prosecution of felony elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and has been quoted as saying, education and awareness are essential components of an effective elder abuse program. And as prosecutor, I must not simply be reactive, but be proactive and reach out to the community of seniors to help them understand how easy it is to become a victim and how to take steps to lessen the risks. So thank you, Paul, and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Joanne. And let me just go over to my presentation. And Joanne, can you hear me well enough?
I can, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining in. And thank you so much. Let me just put, do you have my, I guess I need my, do I have, just 1 second here. I'm just trying to get my video. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much. And I want to say a special thank you to DA Stephanie Bridget. Thank you so much for being part of this conference through webinar. Thank you for the leadership you have shown in your office. And it's just very encouraging to hear that last year your office prosecuted 47 cases of elder abuse. You know, as I go around the country, Stephanie, there are many elected DAs who can't even tell me how many cases they've prosecuted. They just don't keep those kind of stats. And sadly, nor do they consider it a priority. So I'm very grateful to you, and I know the community are grateful to you for your leadership in this area. You know, I'm very fond of Shasta County, and just had some great memories last year of coming to the seminar we had. It was packed out, and just so thank you to all the sponsors and Colleen and Joanne. So as some of you know, last Monday, June 15th, was World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And Reading, you didn't let us down. You really shone the color purple, which is the color associated with elder abuse awareness. I just think this is a stunning photo. And it just really captivates some beauty up there in your part of the country. And you made sure that the town hall and the city hall knew about this. And as people passed, you could show them that about the serious nature of elder abuse. There we have two of our finest, and we will be hearing from Investigator Boone later on in the panel discussion. So thank you also to Reading Police Department and to all law enforcement who participate in trying to protect and pursue justice on behalf of elders. And it's not just law enforcement, it is a great team you have up there in Shasta County. Thank you, one and all. And just stunning photos. There you go, true heroes. And last year, you really went out on a limb. I was so impressed with your cop car, thanks to Boone. I showed this photo all over. I mean, I was there June 5th. I went around and I said, okay, next year we've got to do this in every police department around the country. I tried to get people in the UK to do it, maybe next year. But Redding, you really showed the lead. Thank you. So a little bit about my background. As you can tell, I'm not exactly from Southern California. I was born, raised, educated in the UK. And after law school, I decided, well, what do I do? Become a barrister or to become a solicitor? I chose neither. I went and became a teacher in Africa for 2 years, in Kenya, doing Peace Corps. But then came back and started out as a barrister, but then decided I didn't look good in a wig and a gown, so I quit and became a general practitioner. So how on earth did a UK solicitor end up in California as a prosecutor? Well, as they say, every good story starts with once upon a time. A young Englishman met a young lady from Southern California, right? Well, yeah, I know, you heard this story from him, but he was long after what I found out. So I was fortunate enough to find the love of my life in 1973, was traveling around America, came to San Diego for 2 whole days, walked into a Baptist church in San Diego, and there she was, sitting down in the only empty seat next to her. I met her, and we got married 5 years later. And I'm just so thankful she's also one of the attendees on today's seminar. We were there in England for 13 years, where I was a solicitor. And then in 1991, we decided to bring Sue back to her hometown of San Diego. 2 children, aged 4 and 10. I was jobless, I was unqualified, but wonderful things happened. I was able to pass the California bar, a miracle, I know, but I passed it and then joined the DA's office 2 years later. I'm so proud to still be associated with this great office. And I'm sure that Stephanie knows well, my former boss, Summer Stephan, who, like Stephanie, is a superb career prosecutor. So I was primarily, for 22 out of the 25 years, in the Family Protection Division. So I can honestly tell you that not one day passed when I was thinking, I don't want to do this. Every day I went into the office, I was so thankful to be a deputy DA. So why on earth would I then quit? Well, it's all about numbers. You see, in March of 2018, I had just celebrated my 25th year in the county. And I looked at that number and thought, yeah, that looks a pretty good number. That may be a good time to leave. Also, I got a very good advice from my late father. And this is what he told me early on in my career. He said, Paul, always leave something before they want you to. And I thought, you know, that makes a lot of sense. So I decided to do that while I was still on the upward curve. This number also impacted my decision to leave. I had turned 66 in March of 2018. Yes, I am officially one of your California elders. The last 3 cases that I prosecuted in 2018, unfortunately for me, all of my victims were younger than me. It wasn't good. So also I decided that because Social Security kicked in, I added that to my county pension. It seemed like an appropriate decision. But let me also tell you that when you actually turn 66, things change. And I want to show you this screen, looking back 40 years, comparing what life was like for me in 1979 to what life was like last year. Things have changed over the course of time. Now, I show this to a lot of seniors when I talk to older adults, and they, particularly seniors in their 70s and 80s, they really enjoy this. This number also impacted my decision to quit the office. No, this is not my county investment pension, okay? This is a headline that I saw in 2018, which I questioned, and this is the headline. And it really hit home to me, and I questioned the author, and I said, are you sure about this? He said, well, actually, I think it's a little too conservative. At the same time, in early 2018, I was getting more and more phone calls from all over the country, from prosecutors, social workers, from law enforcement, other people asking me the same thing. Mr. Greenwood, we are seeing a huge escalation in financial elder abuse cases. Can you come and share some of the lessons that you've learned with our agency? And so for all those reasons, and for the fact that I had mentored a younger, very energetic, brilliant prosecutor called Scott Perillo, I decided maybe this is the time for me to spread my wings a little bit and share the information that I've been privileged to learn over the last 22 years. You know, this number also impacted my decision to leave the office. 2 years ago, my wife and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. And, you know, I realized life is precious, life is short, and we want to spend as much time as we can with our loved ones. So I decided we needed to have a little gift to ourselves to spend more time together. And that's what we've been able to do, especially since COVID. So this is my great office that I joined in 1993. And it was in 1995 in December that my whole career perspective changed radically. Suddenly I got the call from the elected DA, and he called me into his office and he sat me down. I could tell he was upset. And he said, I've just had a very angry phone call from Adult Protective Services. I said, who are they? He says, I don't know, but they're angry. I says, why are they angry? He says, because apparently we are ignoring a huge escalating problem called elder abuse. I said, excuse me, what's that? He says, I don't know, but you are about to find out because you are going to be now the new head of a new unit that I've just created. And that was it. And so that my journey began. Now, I have to be honest and tell you that when I was given this assignment, I thought I would do it for 2 years, 3 years max. How wrong I was. So I started in January 1996, and it became my assignment for the next 22 years, which in itself is very unusual because most prosecutors in at least larger offices rotate, and they do gang prosecutions, they do domestic violence, they do robberies, drug sales, narcotics, you know, and then they move around. But for me, this was it. Why? A lot of people ask me that question, and I said primarily 2 reasons. And this is who they are. You're looking at them. Sadly, I've lost both of my parents now. My dad, who sadly contracted Alzheimer's disease when he was 79, he passed away at age 92 in a facility that we placed him in the last 7 years of his life. This was taken on my dad's 90th birthday. We hired a very special old car to bring him from the facility to the home that he loved. He was such an avid gardener. And my mom, bless her heart, she prepared a wonderful party for my dad, and we celebrated his life. My mom sadly passed away just last November, aged 96. But I think of my dad in this way, and this is one of the major reasons why this became my assignment for 22 years, because you see, I discovered that my dad, like so many of his generation, was a World War II hero. My dad became a bomber pilot, a B-25 bomber pilot. He survived 79 bombing missions. I now own his flight logbooks, and I've read every single one of those flight logs. Mission number 6, June 4th, 1944, my dad was shot down over the Adriatic, plummeted beneath the Adriatic waves, and was thankfully rescued by Yugoslav fishermen. True hero. But you know what? Whenever I discuss this with my dad, he totally dismissed that. No, I'm not a hero. I was just doing what I was called to do. So many of his generation are like that. The tragic thing is we are losing our World War II survivors. And within 2 or 3 years, there'll be none of them left. So they gave me everything that a prosecutor needs, right? Office, phone, yellow pad, computer, but there was one major snag. No cases, not one. You see, I was used to having detectives, police officers coming through the DA's office, dropping off drug cases, dropping off a robbery case, a burglary case. But here I was, opening up for elder abuse cases. There were none. Just silence. And this has been a huge barrier. And you know, this poster from Illinois became my kind of mantra, my motto for the next 22 years. And without exaggeration, I would go to work every day with this thought in mind: what can I do today to help break through this wall of silence that so often is put up by the victims themselves? And I was astonished to find that even though California had on the criminal statute books a crime of elder abuse since the mid-80s. It had not been widely used, and unfortunately, it's still not being widely used, although, as you've heard from Stephanie, Shasta County is using it, and other DA's offices are using it, but we've got to get the message out to every single of the 58 counties. So this is the code section. Why do I give it to you? Because when you're talking to a police officer, you'll find they never use they never use words. They only use numbers. So for example, you'll never hear a police officer talk about a robbery in California. They'll talk about a 211. They'll never use the word burglary. They say 459. So why do you need to know 368? Because when you're calling and making a report, you want to say to the officer, I want to make a report of a 368. That will give you street credibility straight away. And what does that code section say? Well, there are two types of victims under that code. Firstly, elders, and secondly, dependent adults. And California, as I've already mentioned, defines an elder as anybody over the age of 65. That's pretty good, although actually I'm kind of more in favor of the two states that make 70 the definition of an elder. That's Colorado and Kansas. But there are other states like Illinois and others that define elders as 60. That's far too young. Dependent adult is also part of the code. And I'm so thankful that we include that in our code section. And you know, so often people with disabilities are often overlooked and ignored, just like older adults have been in the past when they are a victim of a crime. So we use the same techniques, we apply the same evidence when the victim is somebody with mental or physical limitations aged 18 through 64. We simply call them a dependent adult. You know, there are various types of conduct that fall under the umbrella of 368. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect by a caregiver. Then there's financial abuse by a non-caregiver, financial abuse by a caregiver, and then they decided to stick in this extra bit of forced imprisonment. So those are the kind of the categories, but of course, it covers more than that. There's sadly a lot of sexual exploitation going on out there amongst our older adults, particularly in long-term care facilities. One thing though that we always need to remind ourselves of is that we have to establish that the defendant knew or reasonably should have known that his victim was over the age of 65 or was a dependent adult. You know, whenever a police officer or a detective would bring me a new case, I would always ask for the photo of the victim to be right there on the top of the file. And if that victim was, say, aged between 65 and 70, the first thing I would do is walk around the office on my floor and show all my colleagues the photo of the victim. I say, how old do you think this person is? And I would get a straw poll from opinions. And if some of those people said 60, 61, 62, that made me reconsider whether or not we could even file a 368 case, because the defendant might well use that argument. I didn't know. I couldn't have known. I couldn't reasonably have known that they were over the age of 65. But in most cases, it gives it away. So going back to this barrier of silence that I mentioned earlier, how do we go about breaking through this silence? You know, Alberta in Canada said it right. They said elder abuse thrives on silence. We've got to do more to bring it out into the open. The Attorney General for Kansas, Derek Schmidt, interestingly was voted in as the president of the National Association of Attorney Generals. Fancy being the president of NAG, what an acronym, huh? But in any event, he decided to make elder abuse one of his major platforms. He's called it the silent epidemic of our time. And this became key in how I looked at the approach that we needed to do as a county. Silence isn't golden. In fact, silence is our enemy. It's always going to be our enemy. It's going to be a barrier to successful investigation and prosecution. And to help us understand why there's so much silence out there, we need to look at the dynamics. Why are so many older adults who are victims afraid of coming forward? Why are they so full of shame? What can we do to counteract that? And you know, I'm so glad that Stephanie mentioned in her presentation about the key role of victim advocates. They are absolutely vital because they can help a victim understand not to be embarrassed, not to be ashamed, to give them encouragement. Many victims are also under the mistaken impression that by coming forward, they're going to lose independence. And that, again, that's something that victim advocates can change about them. They can say, no, not necessarily. You're not going to lose your home. We want to remove the threat to make your life happier and safer. Really, what does it take to break through this barrier of silence? It takes a community to keep our elders safe. And I love this quote from Helen Keller, because we don't work in silos, we don't work independently, we have to work together in order to be effective. You know, last year, my wife and I had the great privilege to speak on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day in, of all places, Hawaii. And one of the permanent images that I brought back from that trip was on the night before we flew home, I watched the outrigger canoes setting out from the bay in Maui. And I was fascinated at their coordination, how they were all rowing their paddles together. And I compare that to some of the stories of when I used to be in a two-person kayak and in my much younger days. And sometimes we'd end up going in circles because we weren't working in sync together. You know, when we, from different teams, from different agencies, work together, we can really move forward. And I think we're seeing that in your great county of Shasta and in other rural counties. If there's one major lesson that I learned from prosecuting elder abuse cases, is this. In order for me to stand in front of a jury giving a closing argument in a serious felony elder abuse case, that would only be possible because of all the people surrounding me in a team. It takes a team, it takes a village, it takes a community to make this happen. Those 47 cases in Shasta County last year didn't just happen because of one person saying to another person, coming to the DA's office. It took a whole team approach. And that's why all of us on this seminar, on this webinar, attendees, panelists, we can all be part of the solution to help identify acts of elder abuse so that we learn when we hear, when we see, this is a violation potentially of Penal Code section 368. We help to report acts of elder abuse to the right agencies. And today you're going to hear from panelists who can help us in that direction. When you're in Shasta County or in another local county, who do you call? If the crime occurs in a long-term care facility and the suspect is somebody from outside the facility, is it Adult Protective Services? Is it the Ombudsman? Is it the police department? Those are questions that we can ask and hopefully get answers to. We can also do our part as a team, as a community, to help prevent acts of elder abuse. You know, there's nothing more rewarding than knowing that we possibly have done something, said something to prevent a perpetrator from getting away with it or getting to another victim. We also need to be able to help our law enforcement brothers and sisters and our good friends in the DA's office and in other prosecutors' offices. Remember, it's not just our county district attorney. We have municipal prosecutors occasionally. We also have the state attorney general's office, with whom I work very closely with down in San Diego. And now, since 2017, we can also call upon our US attorney, thanks to the first federal legislation of its kind, which in 2017 appointed in every US attorney's office an elder justice coordinator. So it takes all kinds of prosecutors to be part of the team. Also, we need to spread the awareness. We've got to share the information that we pick up from today's seminar with others. Thankfully, this webinar is being recorded. We need to put this on our websites. We need to share it with as many people as we can and say, you know, listen to some of this and pass it on. Don't keep it to ourselves. And for many of us, we have got to become louder advocates. A side reason as to why I chose to leave the office is what I wanted to be able to be a louder advocate and not be worried about what my boss might be thinking, although I don't think she was embarrassed by things I said, but it just gives me a little bit more of a freedom to voice my opinion and share. And thankfully, I was able to do that in her election and be a campaigner for her, because she makes elder abuse, as Stephanie does, a real priority. Ultimately, we can all be gatekeepers, and you've heard about the gatekeeper program here in Shasta County. We all can be on the team. Now, what I'm going to share with you is not an exclusive list, but it just gives you an idea of who I believe should be on our teams. And it involves all kinds of people. For example, mail carriers. Why are they important? It's because they have daily contact sometimes with an older person. And particularly in this COVID environment, the mail carrier may be the only person that the elderly resident actually gets to talk to through a screen door. Similarly, Meals on Wheels, they get to see people that others of us may not ever. So they need to be in on it. They need to recognize. What about hairstylists? Thankfully, now some of us have been able to get out to the hairdresser. I was able to do that two weeks ago. And boy, what a difference. But hairstylists, before COVID at least, were seeing elderly customers and they would notice bruises on their arms. That's where they can be of great importance. Of course, all kinds of medical personnel, ER nurses, triage nurses, doctors. Don't forget the medical social workers in the hospitals who are the discharge planners. Don't forget the paramedics. Oh my goodness, the paramedics were, apart from my victim, my favorite witness on my witness list in trial. Why is that? Because have you ever met an ugly paramedic? No, they don't exist. And of course, have you ever met a juror who doesn't love your paramedic? No, because paramedics are heroes. They save lives, they climb trees to rescue cats, and they are believable and credible. And often, in my experience, other prosecutors have ignored paramedics. They are key. Financial institutions, bank tellers, realtors, accountants, estate planning attorneys. But then there's state agencies. DSS, Department of Social Services. Why are they important? Because they issue licenses to assisted living facilities in your county. They know what's going on. We've got to embrace them. What about DPH, Department of Public Health? What do? They issue state licenses in your county for every single skilled nursing facility. They've got to be involved as well. Of course, adult protective services, ombudsman, public guardian, law enforcement, prosecutors. But what about funeral home staff? Why are they important? Because unfortunately, there are suspicious deaths. And sometimes a suspect will quickly try to arrange a funeral or a cremation, and it's up to a funeral home staff to pick up the phone. And we had a number of those cases where they actually called the medical examiner's office and say, you need to come and take a look at this. What about the dispatcher? Why are they important? Because sometimes it's the suspect who calls 911, not for the police, but for paramedics because they pushed grandma down the stairs. Mental health counselors, probate court investigators. Why are they important? Because they go out and interview prospective conservatees and prospective conservators. And so it goes on. So many people. Don't forget the advocacy groups. Don't forget the contractor state license board. Why are they important? Because in Shasta County, just like in San Diego County, you're going to get unlicensed contractors ripping off elderly homeowners. Contractor state license board, I worked very closely with them and I love them. Why? Because they do their own investigations. They bring in their own expert. I didn't have to pay for that. I love that. And they would become a key part. So much so that I approached the Sacramento office and I said, can we borrow one of your investigators for a full year? And they allowed me to have a full-time contractors state board investigators sitting in the next office to me at no cost to my office, investigating all these homeowner cases where the owner was over 65. Department of Insurance. Look at all these investment agencies, particularly in this time of investment scams, FINRA and the SEC. Clergy, I could go on, you can see them all there. They're so key part of the team. And at the bottom, I've just put in there assisted living facility and skilled nursing facility staff. We need staff to be bold enough to pick up the phone and say, I'm not happy with what's going on in my facility. I think this is wrong. You need to come and take a look. We've had a number of those cases. That takes a whistleblower. It takes courage, particularly in this time where family members are not able to walk inside a facility. We need more and more teamwork from these folks. So we need to understand the challenges ahead. And some of those challenges are based upon this slide, because this is an escalating crime. We know it is. And we're being told constantly, well, yeah, elder abuse is where child abuse and domestic violence were all those years ago. But the plain fact is, it is escalating. We know that every day in America, how many people turn 65? Look at that. It's a huge number. We are a graying, aging society. But this slide should be the one where some of us as advocates need to be taking this to our legislature. Just think about this. Within the next 14 years, we will have more elders in this country than children. Now that is astonishing. So what does that mean? It means that it's being reflected in Shasta County, for a start. I mean, look at this statistic, that the aging population in Shasta County is growing at a rapid rate. What does this mean? It means that we've got to go to our legislature and tell them this and remind them this, because the true facts are this: despite the obvious demographics, what's happening? On a federal level, and this is a tweet that came out from ACL, the Administration for Community Living, we spend only 1% of funding on elder justice issues compared to family welfare issues. Now that's outrageous. We have got to change that. And so we've got to find a way to make sure that funding for aging protection programs is increased, particularly in a rural county like Shasta County. You know, I have a passion for helping rural counties. You know, so often they get overlooked. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be in San Diego County. You know, we've got a lot of resources, and Los Angeles is the same, San Francisco is the same, but when you get further afield, it's not the same out there. And so we've got to find every opportunity to make sure that the programs in Shasta County do not get cut. We are hearing very troubling reports of how the state budget is going to be drastically reduced. And we all understand why, because of the unprecedented impact that COVID-19 is having on all of us. We get that, but what we've got to protect is the budgets for our aging programs. And so we've got to show these statistics to every single elected official, starting with our Board of Supervisors at the county level, then going to our state assembly and our state senators, then going to our California senators and our California Congress people. What a perfect opportunity before November to bring these stats to the electeds and say, what are you going to do about it? You know, what are you going to do to help the DA's office in Shasta County? 47 cases last year, it will probably be 70 next year, and then 90 and 100 the year after. How are you going to help us fight the fight? So that's why it's so important to have data collection. You know, one of the things that used to frustrate and still frustrates me is when a police agency refuses to take a report on the basis that, well, number one, I don't think it's a crime, or number two, the suspect is overseas, there's no point. That is wrong. We've got to collect as many reports as possible where the victim is either an elder or a dependent adult. Why? Because that's exactly what journalists ask for. That's exactly what the legislature asked for. And what I was so happy to hear Stephanie say is that you served in the DA's office 169 victims last year through your elder advocates. You see, it's important for people to know that kind of number. And next year, compare it to this year, and you'll know it's going to go up. I always love, as a prosecutor, to use 3 words that begin with the same letter. So I'm going to give you the 3 C's, because when we are talking about a team approach, these 3 C's are so important: collaboration, cooperation, and communication. And we've got to, as we do that, as we meet together, and these days, there's no excuse why we shouldn't meet. We're meeting today. We're meeting virtually. And once we figure out all the kinks, we can do it pretty seamlessly. One of the things we've got to do is learn to recognize who the perpetrators are. And guess who my #1 perpetrator was throughout my 22 years? It's this person. And I guarantee you, he lives in Shasta County. He lives in Reading. He lives in the outlying areas. And this is who he is. This is his age bracket. He lives at home with his widowed mother. And he's either divorced, come back, or he's single, never left, or he's just got released from jail. In almost 100% of my cases, the son that I prosecuted was lazy and unemployed. And whenever I would talk to his mother, the victim, I would say, "How come your son isn't working?" And she would say to me, "Mr. Greenwood, he has a medical condition. That's what he tells me." I said, "Let me guess. He's got a bad back." And she would look at me in amazement and say, "How did you know?" I said, "It comes from sitting on your sofa 8 hours a day playing Fortnite video games." You know, I know there's a little bit of cynicism has crept in there, but it's true. And these sons also have an addiction. It's either drugs, alcohol, or gambling. And because they cost money, what do? They steal from their mother. They often pawn the jewelry and get their money that way. And sometimes, sadly, the son also has been untreated for a diagnosis of bipolar or some other mental illness. Let me tell you very briefly, I did prosecute and do encourage prosecutors to prosecute the sons who commit acts of violence against their mothers, even though they have mental illness. But here's the difference. We believe that they require and need mental health treatment, not so much jail time so often as mental health treatment. And so I would often have that conversation with the victim and explain to the victim why I was aggressively prosecuting this case, even though the victim may not necessarily want me to. Here's a sad example of a mother who was hit by one of those profile sons, and there he is. And it was very distressing for the mother to come forward and testify, but she did. What about other usual suspects? Well, other family members too. It's not just sons, daughters. Sadly, in San Diego County, 2 weeks ago, we have our first case of elder abuse, alleged murder. Grandson allegedly murdered his grandmother, living under the same roof. You know, one of the byproducts of COVID-19 is the isolation factor that I'll talk about, in which there is growing pressure and tension between the family members living under the same roof without being able to get out. And that often causes family friction and dynamics which explode into violence. Caregivers, so many of the cases that I prosecuted involved a paid or unpaid caregiver. Sometimes it was the new neighbor who moved in next door and saw an opportunity to take advantage. Sometimes, sadly, it was professionals, lawyers, realtors, CPA, bookkeepers. Sometimes it was just the old-fashioned crook, opportunistic person who saw the opportunity to take from the elder. For example, the distraction burglar who knocks on the door, distracts the victim, they move in and grab something and go out. Or in the store, the elder adult is looking at something, they're engaged in conversation with one of the two offenders while the other one's unzipping the purse in the cart and removing the wallet and taking it away. And then, of course, there's the anonymous online predator Sometimes it's someone that we've entrusted to look after the money. Just before I left the office, we were prosecuting this case. A Chase Bank employee in the county of San Diego who was stealing from multiple elderly victims who were bank clients, $300,000 over a long period of time. Can you believe that? Sometimes it's somebody who is in disguise. One case I prosecuted was a guy who pretended to be an FBI agent. He came up to my elderly victim in her own home, showed the badge, showed his ID, showed her a business card, invited her to call that number. And in fact, he'd gone to the extent of actually doing a voicemail with a phone number. Hi, this is Special Agent Ross Walker. We have to be on our guard 24/7. Just because somebody says they work for an agency doesn't mean that they are being truthful. The great thing was that we had caught this guy, we arrested him, and when we did a search warrant on his house, guess what we found? We found a script. Now, I often talk about dumb crooks. Here's a dumb crook. Shows his level of IQ, right? He had to even remind himself, we're with the FBI, flash the badge. Sometimes it's somebody who's paid to take care of us. And this lady, shown in the photograph, was supposed to be caring for this elderly gentleman on the left. She stole over $500,000 of his money, and then she murdered him. We've never found his body. We don't know when, where, or how she murdered him, but a jury accepted our evidence that she had indeed murdered him. This gentleman on the left, this was taken on his 97th birthday. Jack Parks was his name. He was murdered by his caregiver, who got into a confrontation with him after he discovered that she had forged his checks. She started to set fire to his mobile home. She punched him, she kicked him in the ribs, broke his ribs, and 8 weeks later, he died from bronchial pneumonia. That went to trial. I prosecuted her, and she's now serving 17 years to life. He was a true Pearl Harbor survivor. He was neglected and financially exploited by his caretaker. Thankfully, this was discovered by neighbors who called it in to the sheriff and to Adult Protective Services. The sheriff busted down the door and found him in the kitchen. And how did she get away with it? Isolation. She was putting up signs like this on the doors and the windows to keep people away. In the back bedroom, they found all the cash that she'd been withdrawing systematically day after day from the victim's bank. Sometimes it's somebody who knocks on your door. In this case, it was a vacuum cleaner salesman who had previously sold this wonderful lady a vacuum cleaner. 6 weeks later, he knocks on her door at 10 o'clock at night. She lets him in. He says he wants to use the phone, but instead he almost strangles her to death. He shoves her into the trunk of her car, steals her car, ties her up with duct tape, and takes her for 27 hours. And he beats her up in the process. Thankfully, she survived, and I prosecuted him not just for financial elder abuse, not just for burglary, robbery. I charged him with torture, which carries a life sentence of 25 years to life. And thankfully, the jury agreed. Sometimes it's somebody who advertises their services. Look at this guy. He called himself Modern Day Craftsman, father and daughter's Christian construction company. Well, you know exactly where he put this flyer, don't you? He put it in a church parking lot. Now, he's pretty smart because he knows not to put it on the F-150 pickup truck. Why? Because how many people do you know who are 75 years of age who drive a F-150? But he did put it on the Buick Century because he knows that it's guaranteed that whoever owns that Buick must be over the age of 75. And so he did that throughout the parking lot, chose cars that represented they would belong to elderly car owners. And of course, he got people because these are church members. They're Christians. They think he's going to be honest. Instead, he ripped them off. What about if your garage door sticks? Who do you call? This is a licensed company that is based out of Dallas, Texas. But this is the scam they used. They used local area codes for our county. So when you call this number, you think you're getting somebody local. Oh no, it goes to Dallas, Texas. They send in a technician that they trained to come in and oversell and overcharge. In a couple of my cases, the elderly victim was overcharged $4,000 for a minor repair. Thankfully, we caught him, and thanks to the great investigation by, again, the Contractor State License Board, we put together this prosecution, and it was the first, apparently, in the nation. Enough to have a national journal for garage doors, which I never knew existed until then, do a big, big article on this. Sometimes it's somebody who's even been appointed by a judge to represent the interests of a conservatee through the probate court. We call them fiduciaries or conservators. And sadly, in San Diego, we had one. The irony of this is that she was part of the team. She was part of our multidisciplinary team. I knew her. I worked with her. In fact, we asked her to prepare a brochure for us. Unknown to any of us, she had a major gambling addiction, and she was stealing from her elderly clients. You know, this is a growing problem. And I would urge many of you on this call to Google this fantastic article, excuse me, from the New Yorker magazine from October 2017, entitled How the Elderly Lose Their Rights. It's very well written. And also, if you're interested in the whole aspect of potential guardianship abuse, I would urge you to download and watch a documentary called The Guardians. You can get it on iTunes or Amazon Prime. It is fantastic. And don't think it can't happen in Shasta County or in another neighboring county. It can, and sadly, it might be happening. But the trouble is, it's happening with a person who's been appointed with the blessing of the court. And the court obviously has no idea this is going on. But this is why we need to be educated in this area and show yourselves how it works and how it happens. And if you're really interested, I would urge you to go to the Netflix series of Dirty Money. And there's one excellent episode about two elderly people who were apparently ripped off by a professionally appointed guardian from the courts. And sometimes, sadly, it is somebody that apparently you have fallen in love with online. You've never met them, but you like their photo. They just look like the person of your dreams. They say all the wonderful things in their emails, and then suddenly they want money from you. What a surprise. It's incredible how many people in your county and in my county have fallen foul to this. So be very, very careful. Tell people to be very cautious. If you know of people who are older and maybe they're divorced or widowed and they're starting to look for a companion, tell them to be so, so cautious about online. I love this slide. She met him online. He said he lived in a gated community. You know, there are many of these romance scams that are being operated from within the jails. And you say, how can that be? Because cell phones are being smuggled into our jail system very easily. And these crooks have got nothing better to do than operate these scams. And sometimes the phone call rings, it's someone claiming to be your grandson, and you know how that goes. But again, we need to educate everyone we come into contact with who is a grandparent and remind them it's not going to happen. If it happens, they're not in jail. This is a scam. I always tell seniors two things. Number one, your grandson will never, ever be in jail. Or number two, if he is, let him stay there. And sometimes it's somebody claiming to be from the IRS, right? We've all had that call, but again, we need to reinforce it with all the people that we come into contact with. Don't fall for it. Someone who tells you, congratulations, you've won the lottery, right? One of my poor victims, she fell for it. She got this envelope from Pepsi. She was so excited, but she didn't take enough time to read the full envelope. Here's the address on the left from Illinois, but on the right, it tells you that the letter actually came from a French-speaking part of North America, which is obviously Quebec. Inside the envelope was a letter containing a check. The letter said you've won $1 million, telling you to call this number, calling a Tom Ford, and he will explain to you what to do with the check. And he will obviously tell you don't say anything to your bank. Just deposit the check and then withdraw $3,700 from this check and take it to Walmart and buy gift cards. Look at this email I received from another sweepstakes victim. Look who it was. I am a retired Catholic priest. See, it takes all of us. You know, none of us are immune from this. And I always kind of become very wary of people who tell me, oh, it will never happen. It will never happen to me. Well, I'm not so sure. You know, it's like people who kind of say, oh, you know, COVID, it's nothing big. You know, we have to be so careful, because if we have that mentality, maybe we are going to become the next victim. And unfortunately, he fell foul of it. He lost $41,000, but thankfully we traced the money. He had wired it by Wells Fargo, and we found out that it went to Greenville, South Carolina. We identified the crook. That's what he looks like. Unfortunately, he had opened up the account 3 days earlier with a false name, false social security number, false address. So what do? We send this photo to every single law enforcement agency within a 50-mile radius of Greenville, South Carolina. And thankfully, a week later, a detective saw it and said, bingo, I know who that is, and sent us the booking photo, giving us his true name, true date of birth, address, the whole bit. And we extradited this guy from the East Coast to face elder financial exploitation charges. Sometimes you could get a phone call, used to be a knock on the door before COVID, trying to convince you, such a great investment. You need to cash in your existing investments because they're going to dive. The stock market is crashing. You need to do something better with your money. And it's very easy to be sucked into this. This is one of my biggest crooks out there. His name is Jeffrey Milton. Why am I showing you his face? Because he's probably going to get released and has been released soon. And if he comes to Shasta County, look out for him because he's a crook. And he actually defrauded over 35 older victims in our county. How did he do it? He managed to defraud the IRS into giving him a 501c3 charitable status. And using that, he then made a very glossy brochure. He would go around putting this flyer into people's mailboxes, calling them up, and you can get lists of people that you can purchase online. So he had their names, he had their phone numbers, and he had such a very seductive, smooth voice. And people liked him, and he would get them to invest in what he called a private annuity. What is a private annuity? It was something that he had concocted. And in every single case, none of these victims ever took this product to a third party, such as an adult child, or to a professional advisor and say, what do you think of this? If they had done so, they would have realized that it was a con, but they were sucked into this whole scheme and scam and were sort of impressed with this charitable status. And then there was this victim. She was one of 19 victims that I prosecuted the case against a guy in San Diego who sold fake gemstones, claiming them to be the new investment. It's better than the stock market. You give me $100,000 here, I'm going to send you some nice fancy gemstones. They'll increase in value. This lady was one of the victims, and it took us to unfortunately tell her, to break the news to her, that the $100,000 that she had invested in stones was worthless. And he did this not just in San Diego, he did this with people in Oregon, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, all over the place. But we brought them in to San Diego, and thankfully, he is in prison. So particularly while the stock market is volatile, you are going to get solicitations. You're going to get pitches, phone calls, emails, letters, trying to convince you to take your money out of the stock market or from an annuity or from something else and put it into something better. Always, always double, triple check. And now, of course, we have this. We have the coronavirus problem. And do you think that the predators in February and March were going, aha, is a new way that we can scam and rip off elders. Of course they did. And so they went about their business. And really, it's just a variation on the same theme. But there are so many scams out there. For example, test kits for sale online, posted on all kinds of social media sites. Be very, very careful. Don't fall for this. Don't be sucked into this. And in California, we are hearing the alarming news that there is a huge spike now in the number of cases. We're all getting more worried. And many of us who are in this, what we call vulnerable age group, and I suppose I have to be one of those. I'm 68. My in-laws are 90. They are particularly vulnerable. We're going to get more and more concerned. And some of us are going to get desperate for remedies, for help. And when something comes through an email or from a phone call, it just triggers in us something where we're desperate to get a solution. So we're seeing a huge spike in the number of emails purporting to come from the Center for Disease Control or from the World Health Organization. Just trash them, don't even open them. Nobody from the Center for Disease Control is going to email you or me. Nobody from World Health Organization is going to email you or me directly. It's a scam. Just delete it, trash it, and hopefully it goes into your junk folder anyway. Please ignore online offers for vaccinations or for a cure. Again, there are out there people pushing different products. You may be familiar with the televangelist, Jim Baker. Well, he went on and was promoting something that has not been approved by the FDA. It's something that it's almost using a scare tactic and just self-promotion. And so the FDA, fortunately, took out an injunction against him from promoting this product. Just don't fall for this or some others. Other kinds of scams that you need to be aware of, offering blood and saliva from apparent COVID survivors to give you the antibody, to give you some form of protection, immunity. Again, don't fall for it. We're hearing that possibly the president is going to approve a second wave of stimulus checks. The first wave, you had crooks online on phone calls saying there's been a holdup with your stimulus check. I just need to check all your authentication, your social security number, your bank account details. You know, and some people fell for that. And then while we're all being housebound, we're relying more and more, like I am right now, on Wi-Fi. And so what's happening? We're getting more and more calls. Just last Saturday morning, the call. And you could tell it was somebody with an accent who was calling me saying that there was a problem with my computer and that they needed to gain access to my computer and take out the virus that they said was now embedded in my computer. This is a scam. And so we have to share this information with all of our loved ones. Don't fall for it. We all know about coronavirus testings and trackings. And in fact, you may get a legitimate call from somebody saying that somebody that is close to you has been tested positive and that they need to warn you. But be very, very careful about this. Do not give out any personal information about yourself. And then, of course, fake charities. You know, there's a lot of tragic stories out there, and there's a lot of people who are starting up GoFundMe accounts and trying to raise money for families who've lost a loved one or families who are down on their luck, who've lost jobs. Don't fall for so many of these fake charities. Only give. If you feel like you're in a giving mood, give to somebody that you know, you recognize that you've initiated the contact. Do not respond to the online phone call solicitations. But this COVID-19 has also raised other issues too. And the biggest one that it's raised is this factor of isolation. You know, lifestyle for all of us has drastically changed. And my wife and I have been confined pretty much to home life other than the occasional visit to Sprouts and Trader Joe's, you know, the favorite stores that we love to go to get our food. But most of the time is spent at home or around the neighborhood, walking and cycling and getting our exercise. But for so many people, they have been housebound literally, or they've been isolated in their own facilities. And what I'm very concerned about is that as a result of the COVID-19, particularly for residents of long-term care facilities, it meant that family members are no longer able to go to that facility one-on-one. I'm pleased to see that some facilities have made visits possible through open windows, through having residents in an open air setting on a patio or in a back garden to allow more and more relatives to come at a safe distance and actually meet with them. But other facilities haven't done that. Some facilities have enabled and encouraged visual FaceTime, Skype type programs to be used. It is so important to stay in touch with an older relative who is living alone, whether they're in their own home or in a facility. You know, when I came last year to speak, I mentioned how for 6 years, I had pretty much every day FaceTimed my mother, age 96, then last year, on her iPad. I can't tell you how comforting that was for her and for me to be able to see my mother's face every single day. And that is one way of being able to reassure ourselves that everything is right in the world with our elderly loved one. So if you have the ability, if you have the means, and your older relative is willing to open themselves up to this new medium, please somehow get them a used iPad, a used iPhone, or something else that will allow them the communication to see you visually. It makes a whole difference. But if you are concerned about the conditions in a facility, the worst thing we can do is stay silent. Please say something. Say something to your long-term care ombudsman. If it's an assisted living facility, talk to your Department of Social Services community care licensing. If it's a skilled nursing facility, talk to somebody in your Department of Public Health. Do not ignore any warning signs that are being signaled to you by the resident. It may be just a little passing conversation on the phone about they didn't deliver my meal today, or I'm losing weight, or there are people testing positive in the facility and I'm not sure what's going on. Because we're hearing now more and more stories of potential criminal behavior within certain facilities. In the Bay Area, we're seeing in Contra Costa County, in Alameda County, the DA's office is working with the Department of Justice, Attorney General's office, in looking at specific acts of apparent or alleged negligence with COVID-19 outbreaks. Again, we need to make sure that in your county, these kinds of issues are not becoming a major, major health problem. And the only way we can do that is if we're concerned is to say something to the right people. You know, one of the greatest challenges out there is to make sure that law enforcement and prosecutors avoid common mistakes. And I'm just going to share very briefly 2 or 3. These are mistakes that I learned, that I also was making early on, but hopefully we were able to learn from those lessons. And this was a big myth. When I went around the county asking why law enforcement wasn't sending me any cases of elder abuse, this is what they were telling me. Apparently elderly people make terrible witnesses in the court. And I would ask, well, why do you say that? And this is the answer they gave me, that it's because apparently when you get to a certain age, you become forgetful. But actually, I think it's not true. And I like this that I saw in a store window. Age doesn't make you forgetful. Having too many stupid things to remember makes you forgetful. And there's a lot of truth in that. You know, we all rely on stickers. What does your steering wheel look like? You know, if we don't take that sticky to Costco or to Trader Joe's, we will forget some of the ingredients that we needed to buy to bring home. So don't think that forgetfulness is excluded just to older people. It's not. And so let's avoid, sorry, I'll go back to that slide. Let's avoid characterizing older adults as being this, because in so many cases they're not. Although I have to agree that number 3 can sometimes be a challenge. So we also need, as prosecutors, to know that these victims have such jury appeal. I mean, take a look at these ladies. Aren't they just incredible? And to have all 7 of them lined up, ready to testify against the defendant. This is a case, this was actually at a preliminary hearing. I had 13 victims, 7 showed up. 3 weren't able to be there because they had medical issues, and the other 3 were on cruises. And this happened before COVID, obviously. But the 7 showed up, ready to testify. They were angry because the defendant, who was the maintenance guy in their assisted living facility, had stolen jewelry from each of these ladies. Because they were there in force, because they were angry, because they were ready to testify, I called the public defender out of the courtroom before the hearing was to start. I let him listen to these ladies, and by the time he went back in, 15 minutes later, he came out with a signed change of plea form. Not just that, he got his client to stipulate to what I was asking for, 4 residential burglary, which is 4 strikes, and a stipulated 10-year prison term on somebody who had no prior criminal record. Another myth, if my victim gives the money voluntarily, they're telling me it's not a crime. This is a big problem out there. And unfortunately, so often police departments around California are being told, tell the victim or the victim's family it's just a civil matter, and it's not. So thankfully, we have an investigator from Reading Police Department who understands these issues, Investigator Boone, and he's going to be part of the discussion later. And you know, we need to pass this on to so many other first responder police officers. It's not just a civil matter. Because I've learned that things aren't always how they first appear. You know, you take a look at this slide and you go, well, what kind of bird is it? What is the parakeet? Is it a tropical parrot? What is it? But as you look at it more closely, you realize it's not a bird. It's actually a human being sitting on a tree stump with their arm over their head. And why they would be painted like this, I have no clue other than to give me an example to rely on. But this is the same with cases of alleged financial elder abuse. The initial response would be say, it's civil. But there are times when what appears to be consensual has in fact been evaporated by fraud, undue influence, or by taking advantage of the mental limitations of the actual victim. Take this, for example. On the left is my victim, on the right is her late husband, and in the middle is the crook. The husband dies. My victim has Parkinson's. She sells the house, moves into the facility where the crook middle is working. He decides, I want to steal her money. So one day, we believe, while she was at dinner, he walked into her room, because he had the key of every room, and removed the photo of husband and wife off the shelf. He then took a photo of himself, Adobe Photoshopped his image into this other photo, and created this fraudulent photo, which you are now seeing on the screen. And he used that photo to convince my victim with Parkinson's that he was her long-lost nephew. He then convinced her to buy an apartment in San Diego using her money and placing it into joint names so that he could then, quote, take care of her. This was a scam. But unfortunately, when the adult children of the family heard about this living arrangement and this transfer of funds and this, they got suspicious. They called the police department. What did the police department say? It was a civil matter. Thankfully, they came to our office and we had a retired detective concentrate on looking at this case and found the smoking gun of this fraudulent photo. Another myth, if my victim refuses to provide information, they tell me nothing can be done. You know, that's wrong, because we've learned from domestic violence that we can still build a case. Even though the victim may be embarrassed, may be afraid, may be reluctant, may be hostile, we can still move ahead. Because ultimately, victims' self-determination doesn't provide the answer. And I have to be careful here because I know many of you believe in self-determination, and that's correct and that's right. But from a prosecutor standpoint, I couldn't do that. Just because a victim told me, Mr. Greenwood, I don't want you to prosecute, didn't mean that I should then defer to the victim's wishes, because I have a bigger duty. I have a duty to provide an accounting to the county of San Diego, to the people of California, to make sure that we hold the perpetrator accountable for his or her acts. So whenever I used to see in a police report, victim declines prosecution, I would call up the officer and I would say to the officer, officer, this is wrong. You should never write this in a report. But how would I see this report? Because normally it would never come to me. It would stay at the police station. We had a victim advocate embedded at the police station who would be reading these reports and then would be bringing them to my office and saying, we've got another one where the police have closed their investigation. So hopefully that won't happen in the Reading Police Department where you have people saying decline prosecution. Because why am I so insistent? Because if we don't hold the perpetrator accountable, they will abuse again. Why do I say that? It's called human nature. Another myth is that apparently if the victim is deceased before we discover the theft, we're being told we can't prosecute. That's wrong, because there are some situations where we can prosecute the thief even though the victim is unavailable through death or through some other disability. And what I used to say to people is, well, you don't find a problem with prosecuting homicides because the victim is dead, do you? So why don't we then apply the same techniques that we use in homicide investigations to financial elder abuse cases where the victim is deceased? For example, forgery. You don't necessarily need the victim's testimony to prove it's a forgery. You can do that by other means. And where particularly the victim's level of competency, of capacity, was in decline, where you can bring in a doctor to say, at the time of the transfer of assets, my patient lacked the ability to give consent. Then you can prove theft without the victim's testimony. We also need to take advantage of all the resources out there. You know, when I started in January of 1996, we didn't have those kind of resources. Now, there's no excuse for any of us. We have so many resources. I'm a great fan of AARP. I've been a member for 18 years. I think what they produce is first class. They have a fraud watch network. They are current, and you should get onto their website and download some of their material. It is fantastic. Don't forget the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They have their own great brochures, particularly for financial institutions. So take advantage of that. For example, there's this great outline for financial institutions on preventing and responding to elder financial exploitation. It would be a perfect thing to give to all your staff members. The Federal Trade Commission, and they really are up on COVID-19 scams. So again, go to their website and remember to pass it on. One of my biggest resources that I rely upon so often is the National Center on Elder Abuse. They are housed at the University of Southern California. They have an incredible staff of people, very energetic, very visionary people who are producing first-class projects all the time. The best project that I think they've produced in a long while is the E project. It stands for Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement. And so I would urge any of you who are involved in law enforcement, on the fringes of law enforcement, to make sure that all your first responder police officers know about this website and use it, because it has so much great information in it. Also, don't forget, on the federal level, we have the Elder Justice Initiative. Just Google Elder Justice Initiative, and it will take you to a website like this. There's videos, there's PDF format, documents, all kinds of things. Also, there's my top 10 tips that I produced several years ago. We're going to make that available to you through this seminar, and you can download that as a PDF. Top 10 tips that you can pass on. And also in March of 2018, we developed our first ever blueprint for the San Diego County. I'm going to make that available to you in the short version, 10 pages, And if you'd like the expanded version, you can always email me for that. Finally, before we take our break, and it's 12:25 now, so thank you for hanging in there with me. Please, as a kind of reminder, know what the red flags are. It starts with isolation, and we're seeing so much of that now. It's a perfect storm for predators to take advantage of older adults. Let's do whatever we can to stay in touch with older adults who otherwise would be very isolated from their friends and family. Look for the emergence of a new friend or a relative who suddenly, in all this pandemic, suddenly pops up out of the blue and starts a conversation, starts emailing, starts phone calling, maybe making a visit. You know, one of these things that I get very worried about is this new advances in exploring your family tree. You know, I'm not sure how secure that is, but I believe that predators are out there somehow getting access to people's family trees and then pretending themselves to be a long-lost relative. And boy, how that can lead to such a slippery slope. Look for changes in behavior in an elderly relative or friend, or in appearance. Look for people who are suffering missed bill payments, and not just because they've lost their job, but maybe it's because somebody has actually stolen their money and now they're too embarrassed to tell you. Look for people who are suddenly changing their lawyers, their CPA, their bookkeeper, their tax advisors. That could signal a red flag. So really, what are we talking about? You know, I'm a great believer in setting the bar high. And I know this is almost impossible, but I would like us to think that we can reach every single victim of elder abuse in Shasta County and beyond. You know, we've made a good start. We have a good platform. We've got some great team members, but we need more. We need more gatekeepers. We need more people involved so that more and more of these cases can make their way to the DA's office for accountability. And, you know, this is a sobering poster. What kind of abuse will happen today in Shasta County? Will it be physical? Will it be mental? Will it be sexual? It could happen to one of your loved ones today. Again, using the technique of using 3 words that begin with the same letter. I like the letter P. Why is that? My name is Paul. I used to be a prosecutor. So I urge all of us to use the 3 Ps in our daily walk: passion, purpose, and perseverance. It's amazing how far that goes. Finally, I always tell older adults, you know what, and of course I can't tell them right now, but in a few months' time, hopefully, I'm asking every single person who's older to take a ski vacation. And they go, what do you mean, a ski vacation? Ski, spend, kids' inheritance. No, I don't mean that in all literally, but what I'm saying is don't feel guilty about spending some of your hard-earned money that you've saved up over your lifetime on yourself. It could be a new car. It could be a new washing machine. It could be a vacation. It could be a big old TV, whatever it is. Take that time to spoil yourselves because you deserve it. So there's my contact information. It's just been a joy to be part of it. I'm looking forward to be part of moderating a panel discussion. And Joanne, I'm just going to throw it back to you. It's 12:29.
Awesome. That was great as always, Paul. Thank you. Ski. I like it. We should all ski. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and we've had some great questions rolling in. So if you have something that you want to ask Paul or any one of our local professionals and experts, please get us your questions, because we're going to be addressing each of them in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So we've had some people asking if we could start earlier. So we will, I can speak to the gatekeeper program a little bit while we're waiting for the break. So, you know, we've talked a lot about being a gatekeeper, and earlier I mentioned all that information is on our website. So please visit shiningcare.org, and that's where you can find out all kinds of great information about how you in your daily life can just be a gatekeeper. So it's super easy. You know, if you have a beautician, if you have a friend that's a bank teller, anybody, Paul gave great examples of how the different types of professions can be an important gatekeeper. If you know a business that should be a gatekeeper, we would really appreciate it if you refer them to us. It's super easy. It's totally free. We are a legitimate nonprofit. And so we have funding, and so all of these services that we offer are free. So there's no risk for anybody. So a business person, a church, just a concerned citizen can become a gatekeeper, and we will train you, and it's really easy. It's just really a matter of honestly just knowing that there is a problem, recognizing that you might be that one person that sees it. You're that one trusted person that notices that Mrs. Smith just doesn't look right. She seems timid, whatever. You might just be that one person that could make a difference, that reaches out and says, hey, how are you doing? Gets a little bit more information, and it's all consensual. So we don't, in the gatekeeper program, when a gatekeeper makes a referral, it's with the senior's permission. So we don't do anything that the person doesn't want. We're really here to just further assess what's going on and what might be putting that person at risk. And we look at what resources are available, what plan can we put in place to help make sure that they're safe again. So it's very easy, and you can learn all about it on our website. So how are we doing on time, Colleen?
Okay. We got 2 minutes.
And I'm going to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? We've got 2 minutes. So if you're,
It will speak.
pardon?
It will speak about it.
Oh, okay. Colleen can't unmute. She just told me. We have echo problems. We're sitting next to each other. So, all right. So we've got our panelists coming back. So it's time for our panelists to start coming on and showing us your lovely faces. And what we'll do is we'll unmute you when the question is directed at you. So our questions, we've got some really great questions that have come in. And so I will be sharing those questions. I'll be addressing them to you, Paul, and then Paul can then direct the question to the rest of the panelists. So how are we doing on break? 1 minute. We have 1 minute. Grab that ice water, come back to your computer.
Some of the documents are ready.
Oh, Colleen's reminding me too. So the documents, so the PowerPoint presentation is online on our website at shiningcare.org. So that's available to you. And that's on our upcoming event page on our website. So there's Julie.
Okay, good to go.
Okay, we are back from break. So our first question that came in was, how do I know when it's appropriate to call in a report to Adult Protective Services?
Okay, well, that's actually is a good lead in, because what I'd like to be able to do is actually ask all the panelists, and we've got 6 of us, 6 of them, just to give a 2-minute overview of how they fit into this big web of protecting elders and dependent adults in this part of the gatekeeper vision that we all have. And I think that question leads into, in order of the panelists here, with Gail. Obviously, Gail works with the county and for the last 6 years with Adult Protective Services. So before you answer that question, Gail, can you just give us a brief overview on what your duties are and resources and COVID?
So with Adult Protective Services, we are mandated by the state to operate a 24-hour phone reporting system. We get calls 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I have staff that are assigned to cover all of Shasta County. Reports are assigned to them based on the service area, and they are required to respond in person to the reports that we get. The crew I have are very passionate about protecting our elders. Once we've met with the alleged victim, they hopefully are able to put in all kinds of resources from case management to involving law enforcement, the district attorney's office, caregivers, medical professionals in place in order to keep the elders in our community safe and protected and in their own home.
How many APS caseworkers do you have for Shasta County?
When we are fully staffed, we have 9 social workers, 1 senior social worker and 8 social workers, and 2 service aides to help the social workers with their tasks. And then we have 2 public health nurses who also have a service aide who assist us a lot with our clients when we have medical needs that need to be addressed.
And just by way of comparison, how many Child Protective Services workers are there in the county of Shasta?
Last I heard, they have 70-something social workers with Child Protective Services.
And I know it's difficult for you to comment, but I can be your advocate. Would you agree with me that because in the next 14 years, there's going to be more older adults than children, that maybe we've got to figure out a way to enhance the programs for you and your colleagues?
Most definitely. Our resources, there are a lot of resources in our community, but with the increase in the elderly population, those resources are spread kind of thin. So we definitely need more assistance.
And I'm not sure if you heard Joanne read the question. Can you just read it again, Joanne, to remind Gail and all of us? Oh, can you go on unmute, Joanne? Unmute.
Sorry. So the question was, how do I know it's appropriate to call in a report to Adult Protective Services?
Gail.
So in the actual title of the report, it's a report of suspected elder or dependent adult abuse. So all people have to have is an inkling that something's going on, a slight suspicion. They don't have to have any actual concrete evidence that something is happening. If you feel or believe something is happening inappropriately to an elder or dependent adult, we encourage people to call in a report and let the social workers who are trained go out and complete an investigation to determine whether or not something is happening.
And what is the best number for someone to make a call to your agency?
It's area code 530-225-5798, and that is our 24-hour response. Once our offices close at 5 p.m., it rolls to an answering service who will connect the caller directly with a social worker that is on call.
Does the caller, who's not a mandated reporter, have to give their information?
No. We like to get their information in case the social worker that's assigned gets the case and they have further questions, they need more details before they go out. But we do not require it. You can report anonymously.
Okay. Joanne, I don't know how many questions you've got, and I don't want to limit the questions. So do you have another question that I can then lead into one of the?
Sure. And so far we have 9 questions.
Okay.
Yes. So our next question is, with the COVID quarantine and isolation, how do I make sure my grandma is really okay in the facility that she's in? Who do I call?
Well, that's a great question. And obviously that would be, I'm going to start with Julie. Hi, Julie. And before you answer that question, could you just give us a brief overview again, just like Gail did, of what your agency does and some of the issues and challenges?
So the long-term care ombudsman program is mandated by the state and the federal government to receive, investigate, and resolve complaints on behalf of residents in the skilled nursing facilities and the residential care facilities. So my program has the 5 northern counties. We have Shasta, Siskiyou, Trinity, Modoc, and Lassen. And within those 5 counties, there are over 70 facilities and 2,500 beds. So we if we get a call, you know, before pre-COVID, you know, we would go into the facilities and complete our investigations. And so COVID's, it's kind of made things a little bit more difficult to do our investigations, but we are still doing them.
And I'm going to put the same question to you about your personnel. How many full-time paid personnel do you have on board?
I have two full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. I also have 6 volunteers because the ombudsman program is volunteer-based. However, with the latest issues with COVID and everything coming up, statewide, over 60% of the volunteers throughout the state are over 65. So with COVID coming onto the scene, there has been a dramatic decrease in the volunteers. And we are not able to complete the trainings for new volunteers. And I mean, to be completely honest, a lot of the volunteers are no longer comfortable going into the facilities. And this just isn't California, this is nationwide.
And what, in your county of Shasta, or actually all the counties you cover, what is the split between assisted living facilities and skilled nursing facilities?
We have 55 residential care facilities, and we have 15 skilled nursing facilities.
Wow. And once we get hopefully past COVID-19, will you be looking for more volunteers?
Yes, yes. And staff too. So once everything, you know, once we can open back up and go back into the facilities, the need's going to be greater than ever for us to be in those facilities, because there's some grave concerns right now regarding what's going on in the facilities, because there's very little oversight in there right now.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Joanne to unmute and remind us of that question again. Can you just read it again, Joanne?
With the COVID quarantine and isolation, how do I make sure my grandma is really okay in the facility she resides in? Who do I call?
They can contact us, you know, but I also, part of the ombudsman program is ensuring that people are aware of their rights. And one of those rights is they have that right to maintain contact with their family members. You know, the federal government's issued regulations recently that states, you know, facilities are supposed to figure out how to allow these visitations, whether it's through a phone, through a glass window, through an iPad. There's ways to visit with your family. And so if a facility is not allowing you a phone call to your grandmother, call us. You know, people have a right to visits, and it's harder now because the facilities are on lockdown, but there are still ways to talk to your grandma. And if you're not being allowed to talk to your grandma, you need to call us.
And just as a follow-up, Julie, before I go to another panel member, we've had a question in asking, is there any way to check on assisted living or skilled nursing facility reviews online? Is there a dedicated website that talks about what's a good facility or who's got bad reviews?
Community Care Licensing, on their website, they have a list of all of the facilities, so you can go in there on the webpage and check out the facility, and they will have all the complaints, the investigations, you know, what the findings are on that particular facility.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm going to introduce to you your Chief Deputy Fire Chief, Jay. Thank you so much for being part of this, Jay. And I read from your bio that you're a fairly new resident of Shasta County. You came from Washington, and so tell us what's been your experience over the last year as Deputy Chief, and what are you seeing from your perspective in terms of getting involved in elder abuse issues? Because I'm assuming you have men and women who are cross-trained to be first responders out there to the house or to the facility. Is that right?
That's correct. First off, I wanted to thank you for pointing out that paramedics are attractive.
Thank you.
I was a paramedic for 25 years, so if you guys need anybody, I see the cops rolling their eyes.
They're just jealous.
Right, they are. Police have to have heroes also, and we're glad to be able to do that for you anytime. Come on down, we have donuts ready.
Love it.
Yeah, you know, I've been here 10 months now, and so I'm getting to learn the system. I spent 27 years in the state of Washington as a paramedic and battalion chief in a fire jurisdiction outside the city of Tacoma, and we had very similar programs that are here. And I think the most important thing is recognition that there's an issue. Most of the time, the fire department typically gets involved because something's gone a little too far. There's a medical emergency. Somebody's burnt some food in their house because of either carelessness, or they have diminished mental capacity because of either age, Alzheimer's, things like that, where it may be the first time something's even recognized that there's an issue with that person. And I think that's a great place for the fire service to be a part of this as a gatekeeper, to be able to get those people the help that they need, to get the, other professionals to evaluate their household, their finances, and show them what's available, because there are so many resources available to people. I just don't know how many general citizens are aware of the resources available to them, and especially the elderly population. It's there, it's just they need to find out how to get access to it. And I think the fire department's a really good place to meet some of these people at times.
Give a shout out to our Reading Fire Department, because they were one of our very first gatekeepers when we started the program. And they've, because of their vigilance and connecting them to the gatekeeper program, they've actually saved a lot of lives. You know, had they not had that early intervention, it would have gone terribly bad. So definitely it's proven that they prevented abuse and neglect and just unsafe situations. And thank you, Reading Fire Department.
You're welcome.
And Jay, I mean, are there times when your agency is actually the first agency on scene, whether it's at a facility or in a private residence, where your men and women are trained to then cross-report and call in local law enforcement as not only as backup, but to investigate what your men and women are looking at as being a potential crime scene?
Oh yes, we work with local law enforcement, have continuing training for recognizing different signs of abuse in the different levels, either from child all the way through elderly abuse. I think a lot of times what ends up happening is at a call, something's just not adding up, and something piques your curiosity of, this just doesn't look right, that gut feeling, the hair on the back of your neck standing up, this is just not right. There's something wrong here. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something wrong. And that's when we'll get our law enforcement, either law enforcement, or we'll be talking to a private ambulance company that's going to be doing the transport of the patient, and start that conversation with them, to have them work with the hospital system to follow up. If there's an obvious need because somebody's either been assaulted, or we're looking at potential criminal issues, law enforcement is going to be called immediately, and they will be several minutes later a part of the solution.
Excellent. Well, talking about law enforcement, let's bring in our local hero, okay, Investigator Boone, who impressed me so much last year with his very, very impressive unit, your car. And it's just great to see you again. So can you just tell us a little bit what you're seeing out there, what kind of cases you're hearing about, and any other issues?
Well, first off, I do not eat donuts. If you have protein bars and shakes, I'll take it up. The type of case that we see that comes across my desk, majority of the time, about 75% are financial. The other side, we're looking at neglect, whether it be self-neglect or other neglect by caretakers. The other portion would be sexual assaults. Those are kind of the breakdowns that come through my desk. Now, as far as patrol side, they run into all sorts of incidences out there because they respond to call for services, working obviously in partnership with the local fire department, or have you AMR or Dignity Health. Those guys are out there in the front line. They see a lot of our guys here with the Reading Police Department are high caliber officers. They are educated in what the signs, the indicators are when it comes to elder abuse signs.
And
What's part of the other question?
Do you have a dedicated unit, or does basically everything that involves an elderly victim land on your desk?
So what happens is when the calls generate through dispatch, typically it goes straight to patrol, and if patrol could deal with the call right then and there, particularly if it's a misdemeanor or something they could do, or if it's an emergency, so to speak, where a restraining order has to take place, or one has to be achieved through the court system right then and there, and then the suspect needs to be arrested, patrol could take care of that. If they need assistance, all they have to do is just pick up the phone and give me a call. If I'm working, I'll jump out there and assist patrol, which has happened in the past. That's not an issue. So that's A-okay. As far as that dedicated elder abuse person, you're looking at him. We have obviously patrol is the main backbone of the department, and then you have administration, and you have investigation. So with the Reading Police Department, investigation, we have about 12 investigators that are dedicated for investigating major crimes, particularly felony crimes. I am one of the 12 investigators. I am dedicated specifically for elder abuse. Half my position is funded by Shasta County, so I have to answer to Shasta County, which they are awesome. I enjoy working with them. We work obviously very close with the county and also the other allied agencies too, which is APS, Ombudsman, community care licensing, the DA, obviously, Michael Chi has been a great asset in working on cases moving forward and prosecuting a bunch of these cases, which I want to say thank you. As a matter of fact, yesterday we were at a restitution hearing. We were able to have a judgment towards two of the defendants, restitution for $152,000 to those the two defendants to pay back the victim who still lives in the same house but has a rep payee. So that worked out well. If it wasn't for Mike being there, it would have been a tough goal to achieve because he knows the intimate knowledge of the case itself. We work as a team with other agency, and I think that's one of the big points to hit here, how we can be successful. So take, for instance, Sacramento County Community Care License investigator came up. We worked the case together where an adult that's covered under obviously 368 was sexually taken advantage of by a caretaker at a facility. She came up, we gathered all information. The care facility, the home, was very cooperative, got all the information. We ended up interviewing the victim, witnesses, the staff, and we interviewed the suspect in his driveway, and it got a confession. As a result, that was also successfully processed through the court system. So I would say again, thank you for Michael Che for moving forward with that. It's just so nice to have other allied agency personnel working closely with us to help our victims be successful and feeling that they are protected, and that we can hear them when they call for help.
Well, you know, that just gave me a great segue into introducing Michael, and that was a great shout out. And I know last week you said how much you appreciated the support and the work. So here's Michael. He's a deputy DA. He's been with the office since the fall of 2015. I don't know if it's a restitution case, whether you're able to say anything at all about that case yesterday. What's it like being in court in COVID? Are you actually in court wearing a mask? What's going on?
So we're wearing masks all the time when we go to court. But, you know, we're trying to minimize the number of DAs that we send to court because of the COVID. And then on top of that, we've got the orders from the governor. So we're just making sure to follow all those orders as well.
So what type of caseload are you seeing? I mean, we heard your boss talk about 47 cases last year. I mean, what type of cases?
So I've been in the elder fraud or elder abuse assignment for about 11 months now. My current caseload consists of, I only do the felonies. So if it's misdemeanors, it goes to the misdemeanor unit. But I've got approximately 10 felonies, half of which are financial abuse related and the other half are financial abuse related. And then I have about 10 to 12 that are still under review. Typically the financial related cases take a little bit more time to get through and to try and get my head wrapped around so that we can make sure we're filing all the necessary charges. But that's kind of my caseload right now. In addition to that caseload, I'm also part of our family violence unit, which encompasses child abuse, sex abuse, domestic violence. So I have some of those cases as well. But my primary assignment is elder abuse and stalking.
I don't know whether you, because I know you've been busy with work, but I don't know whether you heard some of my comments earlier, but would you agree with me that in the main, elderly victims have such massive jury appeal?
Yeah, actually, I have yet to go to trial on an elder abuse case, but I have been wanting to go on one because of the story that you actually gave at a prior speaking engagement that I actually heard you talk about, where you had I believe it was an elderly woman and you had her walk right next to the jury.
Yep.
And she does a little bit of a nod, and that was the moment that the jury probably would have convicted the defendant at that point, which is kind of amazing. And I'm looking for that moment because that story will always be ingrained in my head. So thank you for that.
And she's called Agnes, by the way. She will always be called Agnes. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, are you yesterday? I mean, it's so impressive to hear that you had a restitution hearing in which the defendants were ordered to pay over 150 grand back to the victim. Is that likely to happen, or is it like at $50 a month?
Well, the order is one thing. Collecting is always more difficult. But getting the order is most of the battle, I think. That way they're on the hook to pay it. In this particular case, we had a victim who was like the type of victim that you've previously described. It was a family member who was then basically siphoning the funds and using the funds of her elderly father who had dementia, and was just using his account for their own personal use, like it was their own account, and was just siphoning money from it until it was depleted to the tune of about $150,000.
Wow.
But thankfully, we were in front of a judge, and I think our judges really do care about elder abuse cases. And a lot of times we have victims who are highly sympathetic, and as a result, the judges get pretty passionate about it. And this judge this day, she was she wasn't having it from anybody else, and was pretty quick to order the $152,000 for the victim, despite what defense was arguing. So it worked out really well. And I do have to give a shout out to Gail. She was there as well, and she's been a great asset as well. So maybe that'll help with another segue, FYI. But in any case, having a lot of the agencies that are working together really helps us once we get into a courtroom to be able to argue well and concisely. And a lot of what we do is it's important for us to be fully prepared and fully knowledgeable about what's going on. And we don't like to get blindsided by defense counsel, of course. But having Gail and Investigator Boone there, it's super helpful for us to make sure we get the resolution that's just.
Fantastic. Well, at this point, I'd like to introduce now your colleague who's sitting there in the same office, Anand Jazrani. But I have to ask you straight away, I'm very jealous. How come you're called Lucky?
It was a nickname that started. I grew up in Red Bluff, pretty small town. We were the first family of East Indian descent to move there, so 30 some odd years ago. Starting preschool, none of the kids could say my name of Anand. So what happened is the teacher just said, we'll call him Lucky, and Red Bluff being Red Bluff, you grow up with the same kids your whole life. So the name just stuck.
Have you ever prosecuted any of those kids who used to call you Lucky?
I don't know. I hope not, because that would be never fun. So.
No. Well, so tell us, I mean, we've heard, obviously you work in the consumer kind of protection side of the office. How do your cases differ from those that Michael handles?
Well, the big thing is that a lot of people don't know, as the district attorney's office, we do have the authority under California law to bring civil cases. So I would say about 2/3 to 3/4 of my cases I file civilly. The rest are criminally. Sometimes they're alike, somewhat in scope or even crossover with Michael Che's cases, but frequently they're very different. The approach we can take on a civil case is more frequent against a business, not just a person. So if it's a corporation engaging in some type of systematic fraud that's repeated, broad, and infecting multiple individuals within our county, the best way we can stop them is I can't pick up a corporation and have them arrested. But what we can do is hit them where it matters the most to them, and that's in their bank accounts. And we penalize them through financial means. That stops the bad behavior, it gets compliance, and it is a form of deterrence against to other corporations who may be engaging in similar behavior.
Excellent. Well, at this point, I'm going to now open it up for Joanne to unmute, and maybe we have some, because we've got, I think, about 22 minutes left, and we can open up for some questions, and then I can follow up with more questions for each of these panelists.
Okay, great. So we have a question. I think my neighbor is really isolated, doesn't go out anymore. I don't see him much anymore. How can I help him?
All right, great question. I'm going to start with Gail.
I would encourage them to call Adult Protective Services because we are at a point where the social workers are going back out in the community now and responding in person. So we can go and check on that person, make sure that their needs are being met. A lot of people are isolating during COVID due to the fear of contracting COVID. So we are able to put services in place for them. We can go grocery shopping for them if they need to, make sure that they're still getting to their doctor's appointments if they need to. So I would encourage, you can make a phone call to Adult Protective Services and we can go out and check on them.
And I'm also,
carry on, Joanne.
So I wanted to share about, so also Gatekeeper program can go out. That's a neighbors can be gatekeepers. So if you're not sure, we can go do a visit also. And if we see any signs of abuse of any kind or neglect, then that's when we call Adult Protective Services and we partner and work on that together. So, you know, we are so fortunate in our area to have so many great resources and we all work really well together. There was we got some recent funding from United Way of Northern California for the crisis response and intervention program. So because of the COVID, we have volunteers and our staff can make phone calls where we assess over the phone how they're doing, and when we have indication that they need a visit, we can go visit them with the proper precautions to assess further. And there are multiple agencies that are providing food and doing deliveries and things like that. And so that's been a real blessing to our community to do that. We were able to reach out when the pandemic first happened. We had a lot of seniors who were afraid and very isolated, and our volunteers made many, many calls, and thanks to our gatekeepers. So all of our gatekeepers helped us recognize, like this neighbor here. So it really does make a difference just when our community pays attention, and then they can connect them to all the services.
And I was going to do a follow-up, Gail. If that neighbor does call APS, would APS, even during COVID, be able to make an unannounced visit for a welfare check?
Yes, we have received guidance from the California Department of Social Services that we are able to do that. We do use, the social workers have masks. They wear those masks when they're out in public or in any common areas where they're unable to social distance. So they are wearing masks when they respond to calls. We do respond unannounced. And we take the precautions to make sure that the people that we're checking on are protected during our visit.
And when do you call in other agencies like the fire department or local law enforcement to assist with a welfare check? When we get a report, we like as much information as possible as to, how many people are in the house, what kind of activities people are seeing outside around the home, so that we know whether or not we need to take law enforcement with us on the first visit, or if a social worker goes somewhere and they're not comfortable, they are encouraged to leave and call for law enforcement. They have the ability to call for fire department or medical services if they are at the home and believe that someone is in need of attention. Great. Joanne, any more questions?
Yes. Why didn't I ever hear back after I called in a report to Adult Protective Services?
Oh, sorry, Gail. Back to you again.
So when someone calls in and makes a report, their information as a reporting party becomes confidential, and we don't share that information with anyone, as does the information on the alleged victim. So our cases are completely confidential and only discussed with the victim or other parties that they allow us to speak with. We have the ability to speak with suspected abusers without their permission because they are listed on a report, but we don't call people back and give that information to them of what happened when we went, because that person, once you make a report to us, it's confidential and it's that victim's information, and we don't share that with anyone.
Okay. And Julie, speaking about confidentiality, what about with the Ombudsman's office and you're talking to a resident, what is the issue with confidentiality? Say the resident talks to the Ombudsman, grabs you by the hand and says, please don't tell anybody.
That's the problem. Well, that is, sorry. We are guided by what the resident wants. So if there is a abuse going on, and the resident grabbed my hand and said, yes, this is going on, but I don't want you to do anything about it, then we cannot proceed with the investigation because we are resident directed. Now, that being said, if somebody else saw the abuse and they work at the facility, they are a mandated reporter and they are supposed to be turning in that report. But if the resident doesn't want us to follow through with anything, then we have to do what the resident requests.
Okay. And as a follow-up that to my two prosecutor friends here, I don't know again whether you were able to hear any of what I shared earlier, which is about we don't necessarily believe in self-determination by the victim. Are there times, Michael and Lucky, where you have actually gone forward with a prosecution even though your victim has been saying, I don't want you to do that?
I think that happens actually a lot more often in the domestic violence area. We represent the state. We represent the people of the state of California. So as a society, we believe these things should not be happening. And a lot of times we'll have a victim who doesn't want these things to go forward, and we're still going to do what we feel is the right thing to do on behalf of the people. But I haven't faced that as often. Maybe once or twice in the elder abuse area. Usually it's a situation where it's a parent who doesn't want us to move forward with prosecuting their child who perhaps has some sort of a mental health issue, something like that. But those are situations that we take on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, we're still going to prosecute if we feel like it's the just and the right thing to do. But like you had mentioned in your keynote speech, you know, that happens where we will, you know, a situation where we have somebody who's has a mental health issue, and we're just going to move forward with the prosecution, and that person will still get the help that they need once they get into the system.
Great.
And I'll echo what Michael said. We see that as well in my unit as part of the consumer unit, especially with unlicensed individuals, or we saw it most recently on a case that was also investigated by Investigator Boone. That was the Little League case, the woman who was embezzling funds from the local Little League. It was a bit of a tie-in because we also later learned after filing that case, publicly filing that case, that she was embezzling or stealing funds from an elderly woman that she was caretaking for. So in that situation, the elderly woman did not want this defendant to get in trouble as part of the situation. She just wanted her money back and for her to learn a lesson. So we do see a little bit of it where it's not so much that they don't want us to prosecute, they just don't want them to get in trouble.
I just think Little League suspect, we should be saying to her 3 strikes and you're out, right?
Well, she ultimately did plea. It was a very good investigation by multiple parties involved, especially Investigator Boone, and stipulated to the restitution amount. She is still remains in custody here at our local county jail.
Excellent. Well, good to hear. Okay. Joanne, another question. Unmute, please.
I'll get better at this someday, and then we won't.
Hey, we're all learning, yeah.
Okay, so this is our last question so far. What can one do when the IHSS, so that's in-home supportive services, care providers, I would say 80%, may in some way be committing abuse against the very adults they're trying to protect?
All right. Gail, obviously your program covers IHSS, in-home support services, and as a preface to you answering, I'm assuming that many of the IHSS people who apply and are accepted are actually known very well to the person who needs the provision. They're often family members, are they not?
Yes, in a great deal of the cases, the caregiver that is paid to care for them is a family member. So when we go into a case, it could be for a completely different allegation, and then this pops up when our social worker is there investigating. So we encourage the recipient of in-home support to call, but if it's a family member, they're most likely not going to, but it needs to be reported to in-home support services and to the public authorities office, who maintains a registry of caregivers if the caregiver is on that list. And then also, if it's someone else in the family or an outsider that knows that this is happening and APS hasn't yet been involved, they can make an APS report, and then we go out and investigate and get make a fraud referral to in-home support services to follow up on it.
Okay, good. In a moment, I'm going to give you panelists a little time just to be thinking about this. In a moment, I'm going to ask each of you just to give your kind of closing one piece of advice, one thing you'd like to the attendees to take away with them, which reflects on your work and on your department. But before I do that, I note here that somebody has written in who is a director of rehabilitation in a skilled nursing facility in Reading, Becky Camuso, and she's saying that that they encourage family to call the management team in their facility, in their skilled nursing facility, to check on loved ones and set up visits. And I think we need more and more facilities like that who are proactively involved with family members to be engaged. You know, the horror stories that I'm hearing, and I get victims' family members emailing me in the last 3 or 4 weeks with horror stories around the country of what went on with their elderly relative. And the one big complaint they have is that the facility did not tell them what was going on with so many positive cases of COVID-19 within that facility. And as a result, their loved one also turned positive and died. So thank you, Becky, for that comment. And before I throw it open to the panelists, do we have any more questions, Joanne, or is that it? With your unmute. With your unmute face there, please.
We don't have any more questions.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm going to throw it up. I'm not going to pick on you. You take your time. Who's going to go first?
Well, the fire department can. We're always pushed out the door.
There you go. Perfect.
Hey, I think the key to this is keeping the elderly connected with community. And if there's always the community watching out for each other, it's less likely to be taken advantage of. And so getting them involved in peer groups, be it a community center, be it a church, I think there's an important aspect of community and being connected. I think when the elderly, or generally anybody, becomes disconnected with their community, they become isolated. Then they become vulnerable to a lot of different things involving fraud and abuse. It's just, they need to stay connected. And whatever we can do as a community to maintain that connection and to reach out to them is a benefit to them and a benefit to the community as whole. They have a lot of experience and things that we can learn from and keep bringing them back in to our homes. And I think that's a large portion of this.
Great. Thank you so much. Who's up next?
I don't mind taking the next spot. So I think just with your one of your slides, just staying in touch with your elders is huge. I think training, education, and informing the public to help be the eyes and the ears will help prevent the crime. Preventing the crime is awesome. I rather go out and do a lot of presentations and education at these facilities or what have you than having a case come through my desk. The majority of the time, it's going to be tough to get the money back if it's financial. If it's elder, physical, obviously they have already been injured. So just kind of keep an eye out. Rather, if it's a relative, a friend, or a neighbor, just watch for each other. A good example would be there was a neighbor that had known each other for a bit, and he was walking by. He looked confused. Well, the good neighbor said, "Hey, what's going on?" Turned out he was looking at his bank statement. His bank statement saw that it was like he was out like, I don't know, $2,500. Well, with that information, the good neighbor called APS. They researched the information, and in turn, that's only the tip of the iceberg. It turned out that case turned out to be a $500 or a $450,000 case.
Oh my goodness!
$450,000 just because a neighbor was inquisitive, wanted to check out what's going on, asked if he needed any help. The guy had early to mid stage of dementia. it was the daughter that was taken advantage. And so with that having been said, it doesn't matter if it's a friend, a relative, a neighbor, just kind of keep an eye out for each other. I think everybody could help prevent the elderly crime if everyone is educated and aware of the people around them.
Great, thank you. Next up.
I'll go. So with Adult Protective Services, we always encourage people to call. And the biggest misconception, I think, is that people don't understand that Adult Protective Services is voluntary. So if they continue to see the same issues happening with an elder or dependent adult, we encourage them to call again, because it may just be that when we responded the first time, that person wasn't trusting enough to let us in and open up to us and let us know what's going on and let us know what we can do to help them. So we encourage you to call again if you're not seeing a change. It's not because Adult Protective Services didn't do anything. It could be because they didn't allow us to do anything. So the same as the ombudsman, if they don't want our help, we can't help them. However, the difference is if we believe that a crime has occurred, as mandated reporters ourselves, we are mandated to involve law enforcement and the district attorney's office and continue down that path. But without everyone else making calls to us, I mean, we don't just randomly go out in the community and ask people, you know, are you being abused? Can we help you? We rely on people calling and giving us reports so that we can go out and try and protect people. So we encourage people to report whenever they feel they need to.
Great, great advice. Thank you. Next. All right, Michael.
I think I'm going to end up echoing what everybody has said up to this point, which is community involvement, community involvement. It's so important for us to check on one another. And like you were saying earlier, isolation is a big problem. And the one point that person gets, or the victim gets isolated, is when that person continuously gets victimized. And because of the shame, because of, for whatever reason, they don't want to say anything, or they don't, that's what becomes a problem. There's definitely strength in numbers. So check in on one another, especially now. A phone call will sometimes do it just to see how they're doing. But that's critical. I think more than anything else, we've seen cases where, just like Gail was saying, where somebody else is actually the initial reporter, and through the investigation, we figure out so many more things that happen as a result, or neighbors checking on somebody. We see that there's some sort of physical abuse that's been happening that we didn't know about. But if it's not for the people that are around us, or around them for that matter, we don't know about it. So I don't know how else to echo that a billion times if possible, that community involvement is critical.
Exactly. Thank you. And our final two, next one.
I'll follow up from after Mike and echo what has already been said, but to just reiterate the fact that for us, it's all about education. Prevention is more important sometimes than just trying to deal with the situation afterwards, especially with the financial losses and the financial schemes. It is so much harder to try to recover the money. And I'll give one quick example where we have the mortgage escrow fraud occurring, more so here now in Shasta County. An elderly couple was selling a home and buying a home, going to be using all cash. And it was about $400,000. They got an email last minute right before close of escrow that was a hijacked email, purportedly from their realtor, and where it said there's been a change of plans in the escrow and they need to immediately go and wire the funds, all funds now, the $300,000 to a new account. And if they don't do it within the next hour, they will not be getting their home. So the elderly woman ended up doing so. It was about $300,000. Thankfully, they reported it quickly. And that's one point I want to make clear. Typically, in these types of circumstances, the money is gone. I reached out to my colleagues at the Attorney General's office right when this occurred. They told me the same. The money's most likely gone. We can try to determine maybe who took it, but it's going to be very difficult. Fortunately, we had good relationships with our local banks. We were able to jump on it immediately, and it was a miracle we were able to get the funds back. Everybody
Wow.
who I spoke with statewide was shocked. They had never seen that before. And I haven't seen it before either. So it was good luck in that circumstance, but I think,
Lucky.
yeah,
Put
very
it in
lucky.
your hands.
Very lucky. Yeah, and I was pleased that we were able to get the money back for him. It's a credit to the entire consumer team and our office here, but it's very critical, number one, to be informed of as many scams as you can be, and number two, not to be embarrassed or worried about reporting it. Reporting early is just as important. So I'll end with that.
Great. And I love that we had that story at the end. Julie, you're our closer. Bring it home for us, will you?
Gotta mute myself first. Backing what everybody else has said is involvement, you know, the isolation is huge right now on all levels with our elders. With our cases in particular, first off, I want to give a shout out to Northern California facilities. They have done an amazing job protecting the residents. We have only had 2 cases in a facility versus what's going on down south, and for that I'm very thankful for, and I think they've done a really good job at protecting our seniors. However, that being said, on the other hand, you have the isolation of the elders, and not all the facilities are reporting what they should be reporting. So our cases, while our actual notifications from the facilities have gone down, our phone calls have doubled. And so a lot of the residents and their families do not know their rights, and they have rights in the facilities. So that is, you know, like it goes back. If grandma's in a facility and you have not talked to her, call the facility and say, I want to speak with my grandma. You know, we need to make sure that they're okay in there, and that you can make contact with them and keep that communication line open. And we are here for the families and the residents of the facilities, and, you know, do what we can.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough, all of you. You know, it makes me want to move up to Shasta County and be part of your great team there, you know, because I can see how clearly you are working so cohesively together. And that's a great credit to your agencies, your supervisors, everyone in Shasta County and beyond. And I hope this has been a great benefit to the outlying areas and give some encouragement to those who are on the fringes to know that it's in good hands with your fire department, police, DA, ombudsman, long-term care facilities, and of course, adult protective services, and Joanne with your gatekeepers. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you for the close. Can you unmute?
I think the stress of putting this webinar on has left, and now I'm half asleep. So we've had people ask, we did get some questions. Can you get a picture of this bridge behind me? Yes, we will share it. It's on our Facebook page. So I would encourage people to, one way to get involved is to stay educated. And so, you know, social media is great. We have a Facebook page. There's an Older Adult Policy Council that we work closely with. We're always putting out articles. If we hear of a latest scam or whatever, that goes out there. And then you can share with your senior loved ones and friends. So like everyone else said, we just all need to be involved, and we see it firsthand. Our gatekeepers are amazing. It's easy to do. It's on our website. You can also find out what the warning signs are, and we can always talk to you. So we're here for you. We're just very passionate about protecting our seniors, independent adults in our area. So thank you. And if you want to help us, let's see, how do I do this? Paint the town purple. Okay, there we go. There it is. You can get this is a window clean. They're free. So call us, come get your window clean. You can put it on your business window or on your car. We want to paint the town purple. Remind people, no abuse.
And other content info is on the PowerPoint on the website.
Yes. So, and everything's on the PowerPoint on our website. So if you want to have a review of this, you can revisit this. So if you had a friend that should have seen this and they couldn't come to the webinar, you can see it via shiningcare.org. And also it's been live on Facebook, so I think people can visit the Facebook page. So I just want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you, Paul, as well, all the way from down south. And I think we're out of time.
We sure are. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.